In Empire of Sin, you can play as one of 14 different bosses, and it's a great mix of factual and fictional bosses, each with their own bonuses and special abilities. And today, we're going to play as one Mr. Dean O'Banion.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about Dean. What's his background? What kind of person is he?
Well, he grew up in Chicago, actually, in an area known as Little Hell. And in spite of that, or possibly because of it, Dean had strong ties to the church, which influenced many of the decisions he made, but clearly not all of them. Dean actually owned a flower shop, and from there, he ran his rackets.
Okay, very cool. Do all the bosses have their own missions?
Indeed they do. Dean's just about to head off to meet with Father Higgins here, which will kick off his boss mission. Now, Dean's used to walking the streets of Chicago, but we can also take a look at things from the world map to get a good idea of what's going on. Here we see Dean having a bit of a holy sit-down with the good Father Higgins. Now, Father Higgins has received word that a brothel has opened up in a neighbourhood nearby, and if there's one thing that Dean cannot abide, it's brothels. There are several things Dean could pick to say here, but he does what he needs for the good of the church. Ah, you're a good lad, Dean. Father Higgins offers him $500 from the coffers. Now, you can choose what you want to choose, but me, I'm always going to pick the cash. And a good blessing for the soul certainly can't hurt.
Righto, but how will Dean handle this then?
Well, in Empire of Sin, diplomacy happens one of two ways. It's either going to happen by breath or by bullet. And either we're going to talk it out and things are going to come to some kind of arrangement, or they're going to go south real quick. So Dean knows just the man for the job, and his name is George Moran, and he's a regular at one of Dean's establishments. You can see him there at the bar. So George is tight with the church too, but his morals are pretty loose. And here he's telling Dean that some guy is in from New York who he thinks has a pretty serious attitude problem. And George wants Dean to keep an eye on him, but Dean already knows a bit more. Now, the story ends up taking some surprising turns and getting pretty deep, but for now, Dean just wants to get the good father's deed done.
Okay, but it doesn't really sound like a one-man job. Is he going to get any help?
Oh, that's what I'm thinking too. In Empire of Sin, there are 60 gangsters of varying skill levels that you can hire to join your crew. Me? I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hire on Maria Rodriguez and Guido Cerrone. Now, I fought with these guys before, and they're fantastic. Gangsters develop loyalty to their boss the longer that they work together, and they also have an individual attribute called morale, which affects how they perform.
We know that every boss in Empire of Sin has their own combat ability. What's Dean's speciality?
Oh, yes. Dean's combat ability is a ranged attack known as blasphemy. Now, there were many accounts of Dean's brutal attacks during the Chicago newspaper wars where O'Banion and his crew were known as sluggers, and they would beat up the competition for rival newspapers. This often resulted in really close-range gunfights. This was where I drew the inspiration for blasphemy. Using this move, Dean will fire a custom shotgun slug at the target, and when the slug hits the target, it explodes. But I really wanted to add something extra, something that would give this ability a bang. That's when I decided that Dean's boss ability would be devastating to heavily armoured foes. I wanted to shred their armour completely, and not just one target, but multiple targets. And as a final piece to the puzzle, the name. An awful, brutal attack delivered by a foe that saw himself as a saint. Blasphemy was a most fitting title.
Oh, man, it is a perfect title and a great move. So here we can see that Dean is done and he did what he needed to do, but there's a whole lot of Chicago beyond this. Dean's going to settle things here with Father Higgins, but like I said, it isn't over by a long shot, and it's going to take some surprising turns. And all of these stories, they're nothing compared to the stories that the player will tell on their way to the top of Chicago. That is mission complete.